if you had never heard of Charles Darwin, this would have been the most famous British scientist of the 19th century. Richard Owen set up the British Museum. He was an anatomist, and he was a Christian, but he was the one who came up with the term for the bones they were finding. He put the two words dinos and sauros together, which means awesome lizard. And that's how we got dinosaur and Dinosauria as a suborder name. So awesome lizard is what it means. Well, okay, but again, not so sure about what to do with them. This is the most famous discovery, I think. This is probably the turning point in the world of dinosaurs. Dr. Joseph Leidy, a scientist, operated an institute like a museum of science in downtown Philadelphia. He heard about a woman over in New Jersey that had big bones in her backyard that they were finding. He asked for permission to dig them up and assemble them in his museum. She gave him permission. He came and put them together, did not have a skull, made a skull out of paper mache and put it on top, and called the whole thing a hadrosaur. 1858, put it on display. Folks, this is the first dinosaur put on display in the world. Now, any museum you go to today worth its salt would have dinosaur skeletons, but it's only been around for about 150 years, and that was earth-shaking. This being America, he found out he could sell tickets. So he sold tickets. The line went down the street and around the corner. People flocked to see this. This being America, other museums noticed. And suddenly they started hiring people to go find these big bones and come and bring them back and set them up in their museum. So all kinds of interesting stories about dinosaur hunters in those days. There's two competing teams that went and broke just about every rule there was in getting bones the quickest and the fastest to museums. Anyway, so that was something. Now, that's not too resolved there, but that's an iguana. They were finding more iguanodons in Belgium, and American dinosaurs, these big giant ones like Brachiosaurus, started making the tour through Europe. That's in the Louvre in Paris about the turn of the century. Notice that the first dinosaurs they're finding were pretty much big guys. When they looked at the teeth, they could tell they were vegetarian dinosaurs, so the image was not too scary, just big. Brontosaurus. This is the first one in the National Museum. I mean, let's face it, the National Museum's got to have a good one to represent the country, and so they found this one, put it on display, and called it a Brontosaurus, which means thunder lizard. Well, people came from all around the world to see this in the Smithsonian, and they look at it and they said, this is a fabulous specimen. I've never seen, are you sure about the head? Turns out they had the wrong head on the dinosaur. It was from another dinosaur. So they really had two put together, an Apatosaurus body with a Camarasaurus skull, and together they called it a Brontosaurus. To this day, there's a big argument among dinosaur nerds as whether there is such a thing as a Brontosaurus. But anyway, so that was on display, and it took a few years for them to figure that out and put it on the right head. Now, take a look at this picture. This is a picture that was in the Smithsonian behind or near that skeleton of that Brontosaurus. Take a look at that. People were not used to imagining dinosaurs in a world with dinosaurs. When creationists were asked this question by evolutionists, and you can imagine, here they come. All right, you Bible believers, where are these in the Bible? And of course, we had two really good answers at first. First one was, I don't know. Second one was, I think the devil made those bones and put them in the ground to confuse us about Genesis. So in other words, we didn't have great answers at first. We got better answers now, but we were caught a little off guard on what to say about these things. So, yeah, oh, there are the heads. Should have had that head, it had this head. Okay. But anyway, to be a real dinosaur, a Apatosaurus. Look at this guy. This is a Camarasaurus. A Camarasaurus is probably on a scale of 1 to 10 of the big guys, It's probably about a 4, maybe a little bit under average. But you can see that's a human for scale. And take a look. This used to be my biggest and best bone in my collection. It was from a sub-adult. You know what a sub-adult is? Sub-adult. I'm looking around for a sub-adult. Do we have any sub-adults present? Where? Up there? Hello, sub-adult Ethan. A teenager, basically, not quite full-grown. And this, if this were a full-grown, it'd be about another 50% larger. But now I've got this, and this is in our museum at the North Pacific Union Conference up in Ridgefield. Y'all come. We got a museum there, open to the public, Monday through Thursday. And if you want me to be there, just call ahead. I might be there and give you a tour. But this is one that we have a replica of that some of you know and have seen, talked about it. I've got a 19-pound replica, which is way easier to put in my Civic than a 700-pound original. You should have seen us. There was 5 of us wrestling that 700-pound bone into place. And you know, there's some value to it, but for some reason we're not worried it's going to go anywhere. Anyway, but that is a full-grown, 5.5 feet. So it's about to here. It's just one half of the leg, of course, and you got a foot that's like this, and that's a big dinosaur. Now that gives you images of what a dinosaur might have been like. And it basically, for 50 years of discoveries, the last of the 19th century, basically the thing to be scared about, if you're scared about dinosaurs is just don't get stepped on by them, because the teeth are vegetarian and it's no big deal. They're big elephant kind of things. Until they found something with teeth. Now, I've been in northeastern Wyoming down this side country road. A guy was driving me, he knew the area, and he said, "Stan, you see that hill up ahead?" Yeah, that's where Osborn found it. Henry Osborn found in 1905 the first T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex, which means king tyrant lizard. And there he is on display, 1905. Folks, that changed the image of dinosaurs. As you can imagine, suddenly it goes from don't get stepped on to don't get munched, or whatever. Anyway, so that's, again, changed the image of scientists for the world, let alone Americans. Let's talk about T-Rexes for just a minute, because T-Rexes are kind of fun. Everybody wants to know about T-Rex. T-Rex, we know that T-Rex ate Triceratops. Okay, now how would we know that T-Rex ate Triceratops? How would we know that? Take a guess how we might know that. Bite marks? Bite marks, but bite marks are not always clear as to what made the bite marks.
They're carnivorous.
Okay. That's it. We found a skeleton with some of the lunch still in the stomach. And when they looked at the bits and pieces, it was from a Triceratops. And you might say, oh, come on, how would they know that? I've got a toe bone of a Triceratops. I could show this to a dinosaur nerd, and they are out there. Say, tell me what you think this is. And they would look at it and say, this is the middle toe on the right rear foot of a Triceratops. And you know what? They'd be right. They know that much. So they do know that much about the various bones and can tell me. So, but that doesn't answer the big question that everybody's curious about with T-Rex. Was T-Rex a scavenger or a predator? Because you could eat Triceratops either way, right? So why would you think this, besides it looks kind of fierce, right? Beyond that, why would this make a poor predator? Little bitty arms up front, how could it catch something? There's a little bit of a question about that. It also doesn't look very fast. Looks like it's got a whole lot of weight it's got to move. I tell people that we know hadrosaurs lived in the same area as Triceratops. These are giraffe-sized dinosaurs, and we know these could run 25 miles an hour. Well, how do we know that? Because T-Rex could run 24 miles an hour. Thank you. You get it? Okay. Okay, anyway, so here's a good fossil. Take a look at this over here on the right. What you see there are the remains of a Triceratops and a T-Rex together. They looked at the Triceratops and it had teeth marks on the bones. They looked at the Tyrannosaurus Rex there and it had broken ribs. And please notice it's covered in mudstone. So in other words, as the waters were rising, these two animals got too close together. Maybe they were fighting for the same spot on the hill, and it ended up in fighting as the waters covered them up. Kind of interesting. Okay, so here's a T-Rex footprint. There's only a couple that are absolutely identified. This one's in an undisclosed area in New Mexico, and still in the ground, I think. 33 inches long, 28 inches wide, 9 inches deep. That was pretty heavy. So this T-Rex is on display in Hill City, South Dakota, and has been affectionately named Stan. Named after the discoverer. I don't know who, but Stan something. Anyway, this is on display. Stan is on display in this museum. This is the Larson brothers, and these are world-class dinosaur hunters. They're very famous, the ones that owns this business. Down below, there's a whole studio down below of dinosaurs that they're putting together and preparing to send to museums around the world. Anyway, Stan's there. And Stan was the most complete T-Rex ever found at 40% complete. 40% complete is the best ever? Yep. Most dinosaurs that are found are far from complete. In fact, here's a little trivia thing. How much of the animal do you need to have percentage-wise for it to qualify as a skeleton? Give me a number. What do you think? 25%? What? How much? 10 is correct. 10% is all you need. Now, why is that important? Well, just next time you see an announcement in the newspaper, skeleton of a whatever has best been found, and it fills in all the gaps of evolution. We know so much more. This skeleton of this new animal, it might be just a leg bone, a hip bone, and a couple of other things, and they're making a lot out of a little. But anyway, just so you know, 10% qualifies as a skeleton. As I said, Stan was 40%, and then they found a dinosaur named Sue. They named Sue after the discoverer. Incidentally, they don't know genders of dinosaurs. They don't know that. They haven't figured that out yet, but they do name them for the ones that discovered it. So Sue, Stan, after the discoverer. So Sue was found in 1990 in South Dakota. Sue ended up in the Field Museum in Chicago, and there she is on display. Sue was 90% complete, so more than double the completeness of a previous record holder. So very, very, very complete, absolutely fabulous in terms of the discovery itself. And they, unfortunately for the Larson brothers who were involved in its finding, it was found on Native American soil in a reservation. They thought everything had been agreed before, but when they found this dinosaur, that changed everything. So to court it went, and they fought over it, and the Native Americans won, and they sold it to the Field Museum for $8 million plus. So not a bad haul. And so the Field Museum is Chicago, and that's in America. They sell tickets. To try to pay back that money they spent on Sue. Now, I have something terribly negative to tell you about that. That is a replica. Whenever you go and see bones of a dinosaur set up, it's almost always a replica. Why? A couple of reasons. Number one, the bones are heavy and brittle. If they fall, they'll break. If they fall on somebody, they'll break. For those kind of reasons, plus they like to have the real ones in the laboratory available to study. So because of that, that is a replica. However, upstairs, you see that second story, whoops, turn this off and turn it back on. Boop, that should do it. Yeah, see that second story right there? Her skull is up there. Skulls are very difficult to find complete. That's almost always missing. There's thin skulled, break easy. So, yeah. Anyway, so, Sue. Now, T-Rexes are incredibly important for the biggest question and challenge we have as creationists, and that is age of the Earth. Age of the Earth is the biggest single thing that we have difficulty explaining because we don't have all the answers yet, although we're getting there. But here's one that's very interesting, and here's how a T-Rex helped us on this subject. In 2005, they found a T-Rex, and they took the T-Rex bones out and took it back to a laboratory and dissolved some of the bones in a solution to where they could get down further inside and study it. They accidentally left it in that solution too long, and it got right down to the center of the bone. Now, when they got to the center of the bone, which is not where they were going, they got to the center of the bone, a lab person saw it, and you could almost hear them across the country. "We have soft tissue here." What? We've got soft tissue, we've got flexible veins, veins that bend. We have what looks like red blood cell stains. How can that be if these are 65 million years old? And a real simple answer is you can't. You can't. And this is based on studies done by evolutionists for years on the subject of how long does it take for proteins and DNA and everything else to break down. They just wanted to know that. How long does it take? And they always, repeat, always came up with answers in the thousands of years. Thousands, not millions. In this particular case, these cannot be millions of years old based on their own studies. You with me on this? So, the scientist who was the head of this group named Mary Schweitzer, she got pounded on. I don't know if it's because she was a woman, but scientists slammed her from all around the world saying, "You're a horrible scientist, you do shoddy work, you're an embarrassment to all of us. How dare you present that there's soft tissue inside of 65 million year old bones? You can't possibly be a credit to the university you're working at," and all this. Lots of pressure mounted. She was listening to the critiques, and there was a couple that did jive with her a little bit that she could have done better. So she went back and did her research again from scratch, came up with the same conclusion with better support. Now the science community is agreeing that she's got something here. This is her science statement, and incidentally, she's a Christian but a theistic evolutionist. This is what she said. Either we have ways in which we have no clue how things can be preserved as well as, no understanding whatsoever, or these bones are not as old as we thought. And that's a good science statement. Yes, sir?
Those cities, Texas, they found in a pond, dinosaur footprint with a human on top of the dinosaur footprint.
Well, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, and I know quite a bit about that subject.
25-foot tall man, that was the size of a people mountain.
Hang on to your thought, and I'll comment on that subject in a bit. So, anyway, the point is this, because that has opened up a whole can of research, a whole different world of research. They never thought about looking fossils to try to find proteins or anything left like that because we all knew they were too old. Now they're looking, and they are finding soft material in many things. They found a Triceratops horn that actually had soft material inside of it. The guy that talked about it at Cal State Los Angeles lost his job shortly after that, which happens in the science community. Anyway, so interesting. So this helps us with the subject of age of the Earth. So what do you do when you have two different methods, scientific methods for dating something? One says millions, one says thousands. What do you do? Well, I'll leave it to you to decide what to do about that. But that is interesting. Now, speaking of footprints, and there we go with footprints. Footprints are fossil evidence. The word fossil means something dug up. Don't look at me when I say that. Now, there is a place in Texas called Paluxy River State Park, or Dinosaur State Park. There is a place where there is a creek in central Texas, beautiful in September, 120. Anyway, you go there and kids are splashing in this creek, and all around are dinosaur footprints in the rock, real dinosaur footprints. Genuine, all around. Lots of three-toed dinosaurs and other kinds, too. Now, here is where it has been purported, sir, and I'm going to take a little bit of an issue of your position on it. Sorry. And that is the subject of human footprints being found in the same level and together with dinosaur footprints. This is a very controversial area, tremendously. The very first person that talked about this and presented it publicly was a Seventh-day Adventist named Burdick. So it's gotten around in the Adventist churches quite a bit, the subject of, hey, we found human footprints along with dinosaur footprints. There's a couple of things that's kind of interesting. Number one, and I am going to take a little bit of an issue here, so sorry about that, but I've got to be honest on this with my conscience. First of all, this area, Glen Rose, is already known by the locals as being a place where they used to do carvings in and make, well, here's the thing. They had real dinosaur footprints. They used to cut those out, saw them out, and sell them to tourists. They found out that they could make them, too. Grinding and so forth, you could make them. They also started making some human footprints, and they were selling those, too, as genuine. And that's a known thing to the locals in Paluxy River area. But having said all that, let's take a look at this. This is, for instance, one of the areas they think might be human footprints next to dinosaur footprints. Now here's a man walking to give you a sense of scale. The problem with this scale is, if you do believe that humans were larger pre-flood, then this would be a problem because this would be today's size. But frankly, as you look at these footprints, there's a few that look human and a few that don't. And that's a bit of a problem. These are clearly dinosaur. The thing is, water affects the shape. Take a look at these here. These are in Utah. You can see what water does with the shape of footprints, and they're not always consistent or reliable. This is a subject that's been looked at very, very carefully by Adventists and other creation scientists who have no problem with the overall concept of humans and dinosaurs living on the planet at the same time. They have looked at the best examples that have been presented, and the general feeling is that they are not sufficient to believe humans and dinosaurs are in these formations. Now, I'm aware of some of these, but the idea of a human footprint in a dinosaur footprint, and there was a 25-foot high dinosaur, I'm a little skeptical. I'd like to see it myself, but these have been looked at. Now, some of them have been found with compression underneath the footprint, which tells you that at least the original was there. Something compressed the rock. But they have also noticed that there's a technique to once you have a dinosaur footprint, to carve around it, and you have the compression, and then you have the newer shape. Do you know what I mean? So there are ways of... Anyway, let's just say it's a general... it's an area still to be discovered. Now, I have to say this, too. Some people wonder a little bit about my position of being at the union office now. The president, Max Torkelson, asked me to do this ministry full-time. He knew about my background. He knew that I like to do these programs on the side while I was pastoring. He said, "You want to do it full-time?" And of course, I said to him, "Well, let me think and pray about it." "Yeah, I'll do it, you know." Yeah, it was something I wanted to do. But he said, "I know that you are careful with your science. And there are lots of sources out there in creationism that have over-the-top sensational things that are hard to prove. I want you to just stick to the best science we know, because we don't need to rely on anecdotal stories of dinosaur bones in the Smithsonian or giant human bones in closets at the Smithsonian they don't want to bring out because they know that kind of story. I can only talk about things that are in front of us and that we can study, and there's no question about. And we don't need to go anywhere else. And that's kind of why, if I don't have some solid evidence of something like that, I've got to be careful, because some people would laugh at that. I wouldn't, but some people would. So I'm just saying, if I don't need it to make my point, do you follow what I'm saying? Does this make sense at all? You're kind of looking at me like, okay. So, that these are dinosaur footprints. Yes, that these are all dinosaur footprints. Yeah. Or at least inconclusive. At least inconclusive. So, and again, if these were human footprints, they would be the size of you and me. 6-footers. So anyway, and so let's keep going. Let's talk about a couple of other things. Some people have wondered, are they really lizards? Are they really reptiles, or is this something else? One of the things that we do have, for instance, are casts of the skin of dinosaurs. Now, I've got a piece up here that I can show you. It's that piece in the lower left. When dinosaurs died, the mud came up, covered them up, and of course the body would deteriorate, but the mud would become rock. And that would sometimes leave casts. Well, now they're a little more careful when they take the bones out of the ground and they find it. The cast there, you can see, clearly has reptile scales, not skulls, scales. So scales, clearly there was reptile skin like a snake. Anyway, how about eggs? Eggs are cool. How about dinosaur eggs? When I was a kid, and I imagined dinosaur eggs, they must be the size of Volkswagen Beetles. Surely. They had to be giant. Guess what? They're this size. All dinosaur eggs are this size. They don't get any bigger. Now that's interesting, and this is from China. It's solid. It's filled in with sand and and preserved like that. China is a place where they find a lot of these. Mongolia, Argentina, France of all places, and Montana, Wyoming. So now, if that's the case, and they think that's from a hadrosaur, but even if it's from a Camarasaurus, so the biggest ones all started about this size. Even the big guys started this size. Not found any bigger than this, these eggs. Did this have an embryo in it like this one right here? Nope. It doesn't have, and there's probably not more than 1 out of 1,000 eggs that do have embryos in them. Has something to do with the flood, but there are no fertilized, preserved eggs to speak of, except a few. There's a few. Let's keep going. So, I'm now going to show you what you're going to be doing this June. If you want to take out pen and paper to write down notes, it's okay. Here we go. This is the Dino Dig, the famous Dino Dig in northeastern Wyoming. And it is in a place that is so forsaken, I can't even begin to describe how out there it is. It is out there. It is the least inhabited county of the least inhabited of the lower 48 states. Yeah, that's what I think, too. So you want to go dig up some dinosaur bones? Yeah. This is what you can do because they're looking for volunteers. Are you able to go do this? You can go for 1 day or 30 days in the month of June. And you just pay a small camping fee, basically, for a campsite kind of thing. Got to bring your own tent. But they have a shower there. They have food there. They'll feed you 3 meals a day. And here is Dr. Art Chadwick leading out in a worship after breakfast. And then he tells us, okay, what we're going to do that day. This group's going to go here. This group's going to go over there. So off you go, and you will dig up dinosaur bones. The only bad part is you can't keep them, because these bones are on a Christian ranch, a ranch owned by a family for 100 years. And they wanted the bone. It's a world-class dinosaur deposit, and they know it, but they don't want evolutionists to study it. They want Christian scientists to study it. And so the Lord opened the door for Southwestern to connect with them, and they've been operating this for years now. And every June, they go out and get a year's worth of bones to study. And this year, we took 6 school teachers there, and one of the school teachers' college-age sons happened to be walking around the edge of the property and found a preserved fossil of a tortoise. And this is still considered the find of the season. So anyway, they're just studying it. They think it's amazing, and who knows what kind of amazing thing it is. It wasn't a dinosaur. It was a turtle they found. But there I am. I'm digging up a Hadrosaur Rib, and you can see it right there. There's the rib. I don't know if you can see that bottle there, that little squeegee bottle. It's got kind of a super glue in it. And you put it on the bone, it just goes right into the bone and makes it very hard and easy to transport, take it out. Before we will remove it and put it in foil and take it to the university to study for the coming year, before they do that, they're going to actually take a GPS locator. They got a triangulated station on the ground there, and they mark the location of the bone and they touch it on several corners. That's registered as to what bone that is. They eventually would take a photograph of that bone and to scale, drop it into a software package like this. Now what you're doing is you're looking at it as though the ground had the dirt removed and you see all of the bones in place where they were found. Is that not amazing? That's cutting edge technology right there, cutting edge. So you can take this, and this is on their website too, and you can turn it sideways 3D and look at it this way. It's pretty cool. So take a look at the bones there at this bone deposit, and you're going to notice a couple of things right away. First of all, tell me a couple of things you don't see in this bone field. You don't see skulls, because the skulls are always the first to go. But somebody else said another word. You don't see order, but you don't see skeleton. Somebody said skeleton. You don't see any bones connected. These are all disarticulated bones. Now, this is important because it'll help us understand what happened here. First of all, this is in a 24-inch deep layer of kind of a mudstone. It's very soft sandstone. Water deposited could only be. And it's just there. It's not below, it's not above. That's where all these are. Now, this is the Badlands kind of South Dakota coming over into the edge of Wyoming. So there's these low canyons. You can see these same levels in different places. And I asked Dr. Chadwick, have you surveyed over there? Yeah. He says, we've done the whole area. Is the bone density similar? Yes, it is. Wow. Have you done any number crunching of what we're looking at? He said, we have. We're looking at the remains of approximately 10,000 hadrosaurs. 10,000 giraffe-sized dinosaurs. Okay. Now what happened to get all these dinosaurs in one place and with disarticulated bones? When you study the bones, there's a couple of things you can notice. Number one, you can tell by the surface that these have not been exposed in the air for very long because sun and dry air does stuff to the surface of the bones. They have not been exposed for very long. Number two, the edge of the bones, the corners of the bones, show wear on them. So these have been rolled. Now I'm going to tell you a scenario. It's going to be a little gross, but this is basically what happened to these 10,000 hadrosaurs. Whatever happened to them killed them and did not leave their bones exposed, but probably rolled their bodies and rolled them and rolled them and rolled them for miles. So far and so much to where the bodies fell apart, the skulls broke, and eventually they ended up in a little low basin and got covered up in mud and preserved. That's the only explanation what can happen to all of these dinosaurs. And what does that sound like to you? Sounds like the flood. It sounds like the flood. So anyway, this is good evidence for the flood here. And so you can go do this next June. We're probably going to take another group out too of teachers and maybe pastors. We'll see. That's in. Well, it's not very high. It's high desert kind of. I don't know, 3,000, 4,000, something like that. Does the Bible tell us anything about dinosaurs? Okay, the word's kind of new, so the word isn't in the Bible, but let's take a look. So this is kind of interesting. On the fifth day of creation, it says God created great sea creatures. The word for creatures there is tananim, and tananim usually means, in the rest of the Old Testament, usually means reptiles. So, did God create great reptiles, sea reptiles? Well, leave that to you. But this is where it gets interesting. Oh man, I can talk about this all day. Okay, Job. I love Job. Read Job when you go home. 38 to the end. God's talking about the animals he made, but he spends time on two animals. Leviathan, remember Leviathan? Over a chapter on Leviathan. Clearly talks about Leviathan and all these terms like it's got armored kind of skin that you can't penetrate it, real tough. You know, spears and swords, arrows, can't penetrate the skin. Plus it makes the water boil. Now, if you have the kind of Bible that has real tiny print at the bottom that says scientists believe or scholars believe this animal is a, what do they say about Leviathan? Can you remember? Crocodiles, right. A Nile crocodile. A Nile crocodile, and actually I think that's not terrible because when a crocodile has prey in its mouth, it will roll with it. And when it rolls, it looks like the water is boiling when it does that. So I don't know, I can, tough skin, maybe. But behemoth, let's take a look at behemoth. The word behemoth means beast, so no help there. Look now at the behemoth which I made along with you, Job. Okay, 6 gave creation, a land animal. He eats grass like an ox. Vegetarian. See now, his strength is in his hips, his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron. Tremendously powerful middle, right? He is the first of the ways of God. Now that last phrase really got me going. I really want to understand, what does it mean he's the first of the ways of God? So the more I've studied this and with other scholars writing about it, there doesn't seem to be any sense that we're talking about chronologically here. This is not talking about the first animal made. This is talking about an animal that stands first, in first place. First place of what? First place in an amazing animals contest, maybe king of the beasts, the alpha of all animals, all right? God's clearly thinking this is an amazing animal, so I'm all excited now as I look at the tiny print at the bottom of my Bible. Scholars think that behemoth was a, what? Hippopotamus. Hippopotamus, does that strike you as king of the beasts? The most amazing animal ever? Take a look at that phrase about the tail. He moves his tail, literally he sways his tail like a cedar tree. Have you ever seen a hippopotamus tail? Second choice is elephant. Big maybe, but cedar tree doesn't come to mind describing the tail of either one of those. Here's a possibility. I want you just to think about this. Not a hill worth dying on, but, whoops, where did that go? Come back here. Okay. Whoops, back. Here we go. Push the wrong button and you'll get that. Okay. So here's the south end of a hippopotamus. There is Job standing next to it for scale. Might God be talking about something like this? And I'm just going to let you think about that. But this would be a legendary animal to Job. But I'm thinking cedar tree-like tail. I have a hard time with hippopotamus. Would this be the most amazing animal in an animal contest for amazing? Yeah, I think so. I'll leave that to you for a while. Let's think about this. Now, okay, another trivia question. What does evolution mean again? The word evolution? Change. Do we as creationists believe that any animals changed? Yes. We believe in evolution? Okay, in this context. This animal did not look like that when it first talked to Eve, correct? It did not have that look. Eve didn't look at a snake and say, oh boy, I'm going to go look and see this snake. Whatever it was, and there's strong Jewish tradition as well as other sources tell us it was a flying animal because it's in the tree. It was attractive, it was intelligent, and Eve came over. Now, after it tricked Eve, God spoke to this animal. And I'm going to ask you to do me a favor because it will help you understand better. For a moment, I want you to unscrew your heads. I assume they're threaded. Unscrew your Greek heads because you're all Greeks. You think Western. You're Greeks. You can't help it. It's all right. I want you to think like a Hebrew for a minute. So unscrew your Greek heads, screw on your Hebrew heads, and I'll wait while you do that. Because I want you to look at the following subject in the way Hebrew does, and that is curses and blessings. If you were a Greek and you bless somebody, you just wish them a nice day. If they cut you off in traffic, that's where cursing comes in. But that's Greek. A Hebrew, it is much bigger than that. It is much bigger. When something is blessed in Hebrew thinking, it is now tangibly better than what it was. If something is cursed, in Hebrew thinking it is now tangibly, literally less than what it was. Are you with me? Jesus understood this when he said, when you go out to a town and you're evangelizing that town, you go witness to a town, you find a local house to stay in that's worthy of you, and you let your peace rest upon that house. But if that house proves to not be worthy to you, then you leave that house and you take your peace back. Take a look and see if that's what he says. Because your presence with a Hebrew understanding of blessing makes that house a better place than what it was. But otherwise, don't give them that benefit if they're not worthy. Do you follow? This is Hebrew thinking. Now, having said all of that, when God says to this animal, you are now cursed, he's talking about something way more important than we might think as Greeks. You can put your Greek heads back on now. You are cursed more than all cattle. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust. The snake will no longer, God says to the snake, you are no longer going to be the pretty thing you were. You're no longer going to be attractive and be able to trick Eve that way. I'm going to take you down a few steps, and you are now going to be on the ground and eating dust. Whereas before you weren't that way, but now you're going to be different. And now you're going to be affected by sin, the curse of sin. It's going to take you down, but not only you, all cattle. You're the most. But all cattle will now feel the effects of sin. That means all animals will now be less than what they were. You with me? Less than what they were, tangibly. What's that? Dust? They will eat dust. I never thought about that. Obviously, it doesn't eat dust, literally. So I'm not sure, but obviously your mouth is going to be in the dirt. Instead of expressing great and wonderful lies, this is what's going to come out. Earthworms eat dust, that's true. So the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. This corrupt, it means cursed, really, or affected. So God looked upon the earth, indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Now I want you to take a look at this critter. This is an ankylosaur. He's a dinosaur. An ankylosaur is probably about the size of this table, maybe a little smaller. And I don't know, when I look at an ankylosaur, I see something that looks like a tank on four legs. Are you with me on this? Take a look at this animal. This animal looks like it's ready for combat. It's got an armored head, it's got spikes on the back of its back all over, and it's got a club for a tail that no doubt it could use as a weapon. Take a look at that one. Does that look like it's ready for the Garden of Eden? Let's go to this one. This is Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus has armor-plated back, and it's got spikes. You can't see it here. Sorry for the resolution. You can't see it, but there are spikes in its tail that it could whip around as a weapon. How about Pachycephalosaurus, which basically means bonehead? Pachycephalosaurus could run into things with its very heavy, thick armor plating. Take a look at this guy. This is a nodosaur. Nodosaur is like a cousin to an ankylosaur, and it was found in Canada maybe a couple of years ago, just put on display recently. Take a look at this thing. Top half is preserved, top half only of this animal, and it looks like it's ready. It's ready to live in a world where, life is day-to-day matter. So how did they get that way? How did they get that way? Is that strictly the curse of sin? Or I might suggest to you that maybe these were messed with. Maybe these were bred. Maybe these were prepared by the ingenuity of violence-oriented mankind who knew how to do things with animals, and maybe bred some, because what would you do if you were violence-oriented, you had an intellect, and you looked at these giant creatures, and you knew what you could do with them? Why not think about what kind of pit bull can I make these things into? Whether it's for warfare, or hunting, or whatever. It's kind of a weird thing. I realize that's over the top for some people to think about, but I just have some problems with imagining how some of these might have been. Remember, the world was full of violence. Incidentally, just because you got sharp teeth doesn't mean you're a meat eater. Have you ever seen this skull? Well, this skull is from a panda bear. What does a panda bear eat? Bamboo. Does it eat anything else? Just bamboo. So take a look at those canines. To a evolutionist, a canine only, capital letters, only is a meat eater. So when you point that out to them, they say, okay, a panda bear used to be a predator. So can you see a panda bear trying to chase something down? Anyway, the point is they're locked into the bottle of sharp canines, meat eater. And now a grizzly bear, you will not find bigger canines than on a grizzly bear. And a grizzly bear is an omnivore. It can eat anything. If fish or hen, it can eat that, but it can also eat just whatever's in front of it. So anyway, yeah, you won't get more serious. So sharp teeth don't necessarily mean meat eater. There's some sharp teeth. Incidentally, this is from a Spinosaur. I've got this up here. Take a look at that groove right there. See that groove? That's from the other tooth coming from the other side as it closed its mouth and wore that groove in there. I tell kids in terms they totally get, this dinosaur needed braces. Oh well, anyway. And these teeth are vegetarian teeth on a Camarasaurus and Triceratops. Now, dinosaur to bird evolution is considered to be a slam dunk. Please, creationists, don't tell me you don't even see the logic of dinosaurs evolving to bird. Oh, come on. Everybody knows that happened. Okay, so what are the theory of dinosaur to bird evolution? There's two approaches that they have. Number one, large brown bipeds, which means two-leg. So, okay, what's the problem of this becoming a bird? You're all right. I was wondering if somebody was going to say what isn't wrong with this becoming a bird. But anyway, you got to lose the big legs have got to become tiny in the back. The front ones have got to be wings, so they got to grow very big. Got to lose a whole lot of weight. It would be helpful to go to hollow bones, and by all means, please start growing feathers. So that is one theory. They know that that's kind of a stretch. They have another theory too that they'll use, and that's called small crocodiles from the trees. That's their terminology, small crocodiles from the trees. So these small crocodiles got up in the trees, and they saw food out there, and they jumped out. They got it. And they were successful, and they ate, and they made babies, and that kept them going. Then, somewhere down the line, the food was a little further out there, but by George, it could grow. It went further because it had some flaps here, and it's between the front leg and the back leg, and so it could sail a little bit, go a little further, be more successful, have more babies, and okay. At some point, those flaps became wings. And at some point, they started to grow feathers. And anyway, so are there any questions? Skin folds became wings. Lungs. Lungs are a problem because the lung on a reptile is very slow breathing. But a bird, when it's flapping, it's going like that. And it's hard to imagine the jump in the lung function. But feathers, okay, so feathers supposedly evolved from bumpy scales on skin. So the bumps of scales, see that? That becomes a feather, which is, a follicle growing out from underneath the skin. So the bump on the top of the skin evolves into a follicle that comes out of the skin. Any questions? Okay. But anyway, this is a slam dunk. Okay, anyway, so whenever you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, you are going to Kentucky Fried Dinosaurs, KFD, and you're asking for a bucket of crispy hadrosaurs or something, because that is what they believe. All right, so, but here's the problem. When you look at the depth of the finding of the skeletons themselves, you've got birds down to the Middle Jurassic, almost Middle Jurassic. This is where they found Archaeopteryx in Germany. That's the lowest they found of any bird. So that's supposedly the beginning of the fossil record for feathered birds. Okay, good. All right, now let's go over to dinosaurs. There are two kinds of dinosaurs that are interesting here. One is flying dinosaurs. Oh, but the flying dinosaurs did not become birds, so don't even think about it. But land dinosaurs did. So they're further down. So the imagination would have you say that one of the ancestors that are down here kind of branched off and became birds. So that's the idea. But here's a problem. They found some footprints of birds down there too. Let's take a look. And this is really interesting, and this will be in the second talk too a little bit. And that is, in Argentina, they found on Triassic layer rock, and they would love it to not be Triassic layer. It is Triassic layer rock. And they found a whole bunch of bird footprints from a seagull-sized bird that was hopping around on the mud. Hop, 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 hop. And left all these footprints. It's got the backward toe, so it's the helix of a bird. It's not a lizard, it's a bird. So hop, 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 hop on the water was rising, and then obviously it took off and left the footprints behind. Well, this is a problem. This is too deep. It's significant, says the Argentinian scientist, because we find footprints with morphology, that's shape, identical to modern birds and rocks that predate by 55 million years the first record of true aves, that's bird. So it's significant because these are 55 million years too old. Okay? It's significant. That's all he has to say. It's important. But he doesn't say why, other than, of course, the obvious, and that is this is hard for the image of what they would like you to present. Now, here's the thing. I think I've got the answer to this. The waters are rising. The birds are in the air. They're seeing the water rising. Oh, there's a place. I'm pooped. Land there. Hop, hop, catch my breath. Oh, no, can't stay here long. The water's rising. And poop, up they go again. Now, as they go again, obviously, eventually, they will get caught, and they will be fossilized, but at a much higher level. Doesn't that make kind of sense? So to me, that explains this as good as anything. So anyway, very hard to explain otherwise. Now, dinosaur evolution, people think when they think dinosaur, that's evolution, isn't it? Okay, well, here's 10 kinds of dinosaurs, 10 families. I'll put a bird in here just for the fun of, okay, that's a dinosaur. So, all right, here we have these 10 in here. And we've dug beneath them, and there's this imagined ancestor in the Triassic area. It must be the ancestor to all dinosaurs. So we find lots of fossils down here. Can we find any that are, no, we can't. We haven't found any ancestors of anybody. And you think I'm kidding, here's a dinosaur expert that'll say this. He's an evolutionist. And he says, from my reading of the fossil record of dinosaurs, no direct ancestors have been found for any species, dinosaur species. Alas, my list of dinosaurian ancestors is an empty one. Okay, so just like other kinds of animals in the fossil record, they show up immediately in the fossil record. No ancestor. They're just there. And okay, so that's just like all other things. Now, what started, what took out dinosaurs? Incidentally, here's one of those rare things that we will agree with evolutionists on. Something took out most of them, no question about it. Something took them out. So they will agree about a catastrophe for dinosaurs. Yeah. Now, real quickly, candidates for the largest dinosaurs, they get over 130 feet long. Some of these are real long guys. But did you know that dinosaurs can be smaller? And I'm going to tell you a good trivia thing here. Here it is. The average size of a dinosaur, the average size is size of a large dog. That's the average size. And they got as small as chickens. You've heard about the Jurassic Park movies. You'll see that there are small dinosaurs in there too. They do get small. In fact, they just found one the size of a turkey, and I'm waiting for the name to be announced. Turkeyosaurus? Anyway, so if that's the point, what is the physiological difference, the shape of the body difference between a lizard and a dinosaur? And pause for effect. Anybody know? Physiological, so the structure, what's the difference? Not bigger. Say that again?
The lizard crawls on the ground for closer to the ground.
Ma'am, you've been only getting right answers to my questions all presentation. Thank you. That's correct. She's got him. Lizards have hips that put the legs straight out. So a lizard gets around like that. Whereas a dinosaur has hips that put the legs straight down. Gets the body off the ground, either four-legged or two-legged. The hips go with the body, gets the body off the ground. And that's the difference. And it's not size. It's not size. And no, we don't have any dinosaurs today. Even Komodo dragons have the legs going straight out. So just so you know, alligators, everybody. Yes? I wanted to show the dinosaurs sneaking onto the ark. Wait. Candidates for largest dinosaurs right there. Okay, what? Land animal. I haven't talked about swimming dinosaurs like plesiosaurs. Talking about land dinosaurs. Oh, 50, 60, 70 tons, some of these animals. Much larger than elephants. Very heavy. Yep, and that's one of the reasons this is a 700-pound bone that I've got here. It's really heavy and dense of the leg bone. So anyway, this makes the whole subject of did any dinosaurs get on the ark really interesting. Because in Adventist circles, there's been a few that have real strong opinions about this, and that all dinosaurs were the result of breeding. Have you ever heard this talked about? I work at a North Pacific Union conference office, and there 2 workers have come to me and say, Stan, when I was in school, we couldn't talk about dinosaurs. So if some of you have been in Adventist school way back in the day, that we weren't real clear on what to say about this stuff. So I am here giving you at least another way to look at it. Anyway, let's put it that way. The correct way, which incidentally is a burden I've always had since childhood. I'm always right. So it's a burden. You don't think it's not a burden? It's a burden. Anyway, I'm sorry. Because they thought it was either anywhere from the devil made the dinosaurs to evolutionists use it as such a hammer. We don't want to talk about it. Evolution's all evil and everything. Whatever. It was like just a forbidden topic. So, yeah, but it's not that way now.
Is there another cow up there?
A cow? What? What are you talking about? Incidentally, I've got an ark in our museum, HO scale, for those who know trains, about 4 feet long. It's got all these little animals walking in, 2 by 2. And whenever I have an Adventist group come and see this, they will always make one comment. What would it be? Where are the sevens? Very Adventist. So anyway, just funny. So anyway, did any get on the ark? And remember this, size. They weren't all big. In fact, I want you to think about something that's very interesting, and that's dragon stories. We have dragon stories from around the world, and that is with dragons anywhere from China to England and St. George. Incidentally, typically the dragon is not the size of a house, but more like the size of a horse. But anyway, what can we make from all of these stories about dragons? And why aren't there stories about giant tigers or lions and bears or anything? They're all big lizard stories. Why? If you ask an evolutionist, they would say, well, they point out my big bone. They'll say, well, the ancient people saw these big bones and they imagined giant lizards. I said, where would you get a lizard from that? Where do you get a lizard from a bone? What's a lizard throughout the ages to most people? Honey, there's a lizard in the kitchen. Would you please get it out? A lizard was an annoying animal. It was hardly a scary animal. Nobody had bad dreams about lizards. So why are all these giant lizard stories circulating through every corner of the world? And it's always something like this. There's one in a cave nearby, or there's one under a bridge, or there's always one. It's a threat or a problem to the local people, and they somehow get rid of it, and there aren't any more. It's always like one, and then they're gone. There's never herds or groups of them, families, one. It's kind of like it's the last memory of the very last one of these animals that was in the neighborhood. We do know from very good evidence that man hunted mammoths to extinction. That's why we don't have woolly mammoths anymore. So is it possible that humans caused the end of certain other animals as well? It's a possibility. I'll leave that with you, whether these are memories of pre-flood or post-flood. I lean toward post-flood, but it's not a hill we're dying on. I can be convinced otherwise. So maybe some of these guys did get on the ark, did end up somewhere, not giant ones, not the ones of the size of, houses. We have a quote from A Spirit of Prophecy. Ellen White wrote about this. And she did say that the giant ones, the big ones, the mammoth ones, and she means obviously larger than elephants, since we do have elephants, said that God permitted those to die in the flood because they would be too big for man after the flood to deal with. Because man was going to become puny like us today. So anyway, but it doesn't say that God permitted them to die because they were bred, just because they were too big. Incidentally, why would God create big animals like this in the first place? Prior to the flood, the atmosphere was such that plants were extremely fast growing. You could practically watch plants grow. I would think God would need giant hedge trimmers. It's a thought. Yes. So anyway, so getting back to this, we're going to close with this picture. I'm going to take this T-Rex and put a scary dragon head on him. And I am going to remind you of this verse again. So the great dragon was cast out, the serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He's a trickster. He deceives. And the image is a big lizard. Oh, incidentally, Revelation 12 is right in front of Revelation 13, which is right in front of, thank you, Revelation 14. So Revelation 12, 13, 14 is leading into the last days. And the dragon tricking the world into something. Now, what would it try to be tricking the world into? First part of the gospel message that goes to the world is remember God as a creator. Might the devil be interested in using imagery and tricks to cause the world to think that maybe we weren't created by a loving creator? Maybe we were here through some other means, and let's not believe that Bible stuff. Might he be willing to try to trick us into believing that? And what image could he use? How about, let's substitute the word here. This is not bad exegesis. Let's just go ahead and put the word in there, dinosaur. It means the same thing. Uses the image of dinosaur, large reptile, to fool the people into not believing Genesis. Because you tell me, when you see a dinosaur, don't people naturally think, dinosaur, yeah, millions of years, not Genesis. Isn't it like probably if there's a single picture that makes you question Genesis, might it be the image of a giant dragon dinosaur?
So question.
Yes?
We know that before the flood, men lived for almost 1,000 years.
Yes.
However, we don't necessarily believe that there's evidence that says man continued to grow over those 1,000 years.
Well, how do we know that men were big before the flood? And let me give you a little bit of where we get some of that.
Is about lizards.
Oh, it is? Not by people.
No. So my question is that I've read someplace where people
Some
say-
reptiles don't stop growing.
Right. So how much of an argument is that for some of these creatures that we find the skeletons? Obviously they hit things.
That they might have had hundreds and hundreds of years of growing, and that's why they got so big. It's a reasonable thing. I mean, if you start off this big as a baby, and you get the size of a school bus, that would take a while to grow that big. So that's possible. Oh, do you know how we get the idea of people being as big as they are? It's a very simple answer, and it's a biblical answer. You ready for this? It says, in Genesis, it says that the people in those days were Nephilim. The Nephilim lived in those days. The Nephilim. That word is a very difficult to translate word. In fact, most Hebrew scholars today, if they're real honest, will tell you we don't have a clue what it means. It's used very rarely in the Bible. So the King James people, when they came to that word and they saw the difficulty of translating it, they went to, the Septuagint. Remember that? I mentioned that in the sermon. The Greek translation. And they assumed that the Greek Jewish scholars that lived 200 years before Christ might have a better idea what the word meant. So when those Septuagint people translated the word, they put the Greek word gigantes in there. That means giants. So there were giants in the land, Nephilim. So when the King James people came to that, they said, well, they must know. And that's why they translated there were giants in the land. Now, that's the origin of the history of how that word came up. We actually think there's something to it, but that's just an interesting order of how we got that. The Septuagint version. Okay, any other questions? I'm opening it up to questions for dinosaurs only right now. Yes?
So why don't we read that as it states, and that is that a dragon is in fact a type of serpent. And that's what it says.
Yes, the serpent of old. Yes. It's obviously referring to the reptile. That's clearly a memory of the scene in the Garden of Eden, right? So that's the serpent of old. That's talking about the one, the trickster back then. So who tricks? He's a deceiver.
But we don't consider dinosaurs to be a part of the serpent family, do we?
Sure, it's part of the reptile family. Yeah. Incidentally, I have no problem with the idea of reptiles and birds having common anatomical features. Not a problem with it whatsoever. I mean, whatever that was in the tree originally was something probably that flew, so something bird-like, and it became lizard-like. So they are cousins in some way or other, I think. So they think the evolutionists think that common anatomy means they had a common ancestor. I just think common designer.
So back in Jesus' time, people were around 20 feet tall.
In Jesus' time? No.
Or back in the dinosaur time,
Okay, maybe, yes.
they were around 20 feet tall.
Top bigger.
And the so-called grapes were at least 5 feet around in circumference.
So-called
When
what?
when it talked about them to go get grapes,
Oh,
they had to get one bunch
Oh.
of grapes, they had to haul it on big long sticks for the two of them to haul because
I-
the grapes were so humongously round.
I think you're talking about the spies going into to Canaan and bringing back samples out, and they were so big. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I don't know about that big around, but certainly they were impressive grapes. Absolutely. Clusters. Yes. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So what is the Gila monsters? I've heard it said that they are the closest representatives of dinosaurs.
They sure look like it, don't they? But they also have the legs that go straight out. But they look, don't they look? Yeah. In our home in Downey, California, which is Los Angeles, I remember as a kid, horned toads. You remember horned toads? Boy, they sure look scary to me. Little things, funky looking things. Anyway, we're going to have a break right now, so let's have a break, and then we're going to get to Age of the Earth. I know some of you will be very tempted to leave, and frankly, have a nice day. If you feel like you need to do that, that's okay. I'm still going to talk. And so let's take about 10, okay, real quick. But I'm going to, if you want to stay, that's okay with me too. But we got some cool fossils up here, but don't come yet. It's going to be after the second talk that you can come up. Isn't that...